Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello, and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley. I'm so glad you're here, and I hope you reap a lot of value from today's episode. Now, if you have never listened to the Grace and Grit podcast before, welcome. And if you haven't been here in a while, welcome back. The last episode that I recorded of this podcast was titled Acknowledging Gaps in the Art of Listening. And in that episode, which was recorded about a week after the death of George Floyd, I shared with the audience my own rumblings with what was going on in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement and how I was starting to acknowledge for the first time gaps in my own business in terms of how I could better cultivate a space where all women feel welcome to learn and grow. I started to identify a lot of spaces and places where I could do better, both personally and professionally. And I'm reminding you of that episode right now for two reasons. Number one, I think it's a good one to go back and listen to. But I also just want to highlight that in that episode, I talked a lot about how uncomfortable it was and is to face acknowledging your gaps, right? Awareness is often a very uncomfortable thing. It isn't fun to acknowledge where we could do better in our lives, but it's so necessary to our growth. So that brings me to today's episode. Today, what I really want to talk about is the importance of learning how to grant yourself permission to feel emotion. And I know a lot of you are going to say, well, Courtney, I do feel emotion. But do you? Do you allow yourself to feel the full spectrum of emotion? Or are you very selective about what you allow yourself to feel? And if you're anything like the majority of the women that I work with, you are very selective in what you allow yourself to feel. And when it comes to your health, that's problematic. And I want to talk about why today. So I think this is very relevant. This conversation of learning how to feel emotion is very relevant all the time because it is something that I see as a major barrier in women achieving the level of health they truly want for themselves. I also think feeling emotion is especially relevant right now when there is just so much happening in the world. And the world is very emotionally charged right now, and rightly so, right? There's just a lot going on. So when I think about awareness, and I think about the discomfort that often shows up with awareness, I'm always reminded of Eckhart Tolle. So Eckhart Tolle is the author of The Power of Now. It's a very famous book. And I was first introduced to that book in my mid-20s. I was living in Boston. I was managing a very busy Pilates studio just outside of Harvard Yard in Cambridge, Massachusetts. My life was fast and furious. And that book really inspired me to start kind of pausing more, being more mindful of how I was living my life, being more present in each moment, and learning how to slowly start rumbling with the truth of my life. And I say slowly start rumbling because how I read that book in my mid-20s is very different how I read that book in my mid-40s. But there was a line that I highlighted that I was rereading before I recorded this podcast today that I know I just want to share with you here. So this is the phrase. Accept and then act. Whatever the present moment contains, accept it as if you had chosen it. Always work with it, not against it. Make it your friend and ally, not your enemy. This will miraculously transform your whole life. Now, when I first read that passage, I'll be honest, I was very selective about the things that I was willing to accept. And for me, it was a difference between, it was really easy for me to accept physical discomfort versus emotional discomfort. And if you think about it, a physical sensation is not the same as an emotion. So a physical sensation is something that happens in the body and then travels as a message to the brain. So examples would be body temperature, hunger, fatigue. Maybe you have an itch somewhere, right? Those would all be physical sensations versus an emotion, which starts in the brain and then actually works its way into the body as a vibration, something that we experience in our physicality. So it was very easy for me to accept feeling tired and then recognize that maybe I need a nap or maybe I need to go to bed early tonight. But it was much harder for me to accept my anger and then make decisions about what I was going to do with that anger. Honestly, I wasn't even willing to lift up that rug. I wasn't willing to look at my emotional landscape in my mid-20s. I was willing to look at hunger, right, and satisfy that, but I wasn't willing to look at my disappointment about certain things in my life. So I tell you this because I think that there's a maturity spectrum to awareness. And when I first started tapping into awareness via Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, it was powerful. I mean, I definitely felt more mindful and more present in my life, but I was also skirting a lot of the truth of my life. And most of that truth was my emotional life. I didn't know how to approach that. I wasn't willing to approach that. The truth is, facing the truth of your life, where you're satisfied, but specifically where you're not, why you do what you do, especially the things that aren't serving you, that is not a feel-good exercise. But it is the requirement of truly transforming your life on a deep level. So when discomfort comes into your life, in terms of feeling a difficult emotion, rumbling with something hard, you can resist it, you can deny it, you can numb it. And many people choose to live that way constantly, which is unfortunate because when you spend your time denying, resisting, and numbing emotion, you don't actually use the emotion to fuel your growth. So we are being presented right now with such an incredible opportunity to transform ourselves, to transform our communities, and to transform our world in very powerful ways. But if we aren't willing to get uncomfortable and feel difficult things and acknowledge where we could do better, which is also going to cause you to feel difficult things, the opportunity will pass and nothing will change. Another book that has been really big in my own life is The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. I pretty much love everything that man has written. But he says this, he says, there is no good or bad without us. There's only perception. There is the event itself, and then there's the story that we tell ourselves about what it means. And 2020 is giving us all a lot of opportunity to learn about our own perceptions and about what we're making things mean. So we started, early in the year, right, with COVID. And COVID presented us with a lot of change, a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of opportunity to be paralyzed by fear and to feel powerless. But not everybody was affected that way, right? Some people were, some people weren't. I should say that like in the present tense. Some people are, some people aren't. And what is the difference between those two camps of people is simply how they think about what is happening, the meaning they choose to put on COVID. Right? I just described it as an opportunity because I really see it as that. How many people have talked about, of course, the hardship of COVID, right? There is a hard side to COVID. But how many conversations have you had with family and friends about the beauty of it? That people have spent more time with their family and friends. People aren't so distracted by the outside world in terms of going to dinner and traveling and all those things because we literally can't. And people really recognizing what is most important to them. That's why I say it's an opportunity. And I'm not denying that there isn't another side to COVID. But when I focus all of my attention on the dangerous side of it, I start feeling powerless. I start feeling very fearful. And I feel just a complete lack of confidence. And that does not serve me in my life. It doesn't allow me to show up in my life in a way that I want to show up. And then we have the death of George Floyd. We had this huge surge of the Black Lives Matter movement. And there's been a lot of opportunity there as well. Opportunity to learn, opportunity to resist, opportunity to have meaningful conversations and listen, opportunity to defend. So much opportunity. And everybody is going to see that opportunity in a different way, through a different lens. But many of us are coming to terms with getting to know what we didn't know, right? I personally, I'm not a Black woman. And although, of course, naively, maybe a few weeks ago, I would have said I'm not racist, I also have no idea what it's like to be a Black woman or a Black person in America. And starting to engage in those conversations and really listen to Black communities and be willing to ask questions, I really started to become aware of how little I knew and how much I was missing. And that's really uncomfortable. But here's the thing. I have long believed that your reaction to anything is a testament to your practice. So I'm curious for you to ask yourself the question right now, how are you reacting to what's happening in the world? And you could take anything that's happening in the world, but even just the two things I just mentioned, because they're both very big. How are you reacting to COVID? How are you reacting to the Black Lives Matter movement? Are you feeling your emotions, the emotions that do boil up in both of these situations? Or are you only allowing yourself to feel certain emotions and then numbing others? Right? So are you eating your stress? Are you drinking your sadness? Are you overworking your disappointment? The reason I ask you this is because our coping behaviors become very apparent at times of heightened stress. That's specifically what I mean when I say your reaction is a testament to your practice. So this is an incredible opportunity to get to know ourselves and how we cope with stress, because your coping mechanisms are probably loud and clear right now. So in the conversation of emotions, because a lot of us are using outside things like food, like alcohol, like work, to change our internal landscape because we don't want to feel what we're feeling. But I think it's important to remember that emotions are incredibly powerful messengers. They always have important information for you. And you can never reveal that information if you never open the door to invite them in. Emotions show you how you interpret the world, how you interpret what's happening in the world, and present you with an opportunity to think and act differently than you might otherwise. But you can't do that work. You don't get to live in choice if you aren't willing to become aware of the truth of what's going on. If you can figure out what information your feelings are trying to convey to you, you can actually start to see your emotions as allies. And I'm not just talking about the feel-good emotions. I'm talking about the things you label as good, bad, and ugly. All of them, the entire human spectrum of emotion. We have deluded ourselves into thinking that we are supposed to feel good all the time. And the pursuit of that is actually really hurting us. And I would even go so far as to say it's killing us. Because if you are looking to feel good all of the time and you're having a moment or a day where you don't feel good, it's really easy this day and age to reach for things to feel better fast. You could take a pill. You could eat food. You could drink. You could Netflix, right? You could social media. You can do a whole lot of things to feel good temporarily. But it's a false feel good. It doesn't last, and worse than that, it has a lot of negative consequences down the road. When you numb and distract yourself from difficult emotion, you can't learn from it. When you seek pleasure all of the time, you will do a lot of things that are actually not good for you in the long run. And this may be a hard pill for some people to swallow, but there is no such thing as a good or a bad emotion. All emotion is a part of human emotion. You are meant to feel it all, and you will experience it all throughout the rest of your life. But when you cherry pick emotion, when you're only willing to feel what you label as good emotion, it's kind of like saying your arms are good, but your legs are bad. So you focus really hard on keeping your upper body strong, but you completely neglect and avoid your lower body. And then you wonder why you've lost your balance and you can't do the activities that you love. Life is opposition, right? We have to know dark in order to know light. We have to know sad in order to fully experience happy. But if we block ourselves from feeling difficult emotions, not only do we waste a lot of time and energy, but we also can't feel the height of the feel-good stuff. So what the heck do we do, right? Well, first of all, I just want to tell you this. We are very conditioned as a culture to prohibit ourselves from feeling difficult things, which creates a lot of comfort. But I'm here to tell you, comfort is the enemy of growth. If I'm comfortable all the time, I'm not going to grow as a human. Because growth requires feeling a lot of things that are difficult to feel. But if we don't feel emotion, right? Like we don't feel it, and then we don't really learn how to process it. Not only do we store that energy in our body, but again, we use things outside of ourselves to not feel. And our culture sells us pleasure in droves, right? It sells us, the pills, the luxuries, the trips, the clothes, the gambling, the porn, you name it, right? Our culture loves to sell us on pleasure, and we are buying it. But eating a piece of chocolate cake when you're stressed is only pleasurable in the moment. Shopping when you're feeling insecure only makes you feel better temporarily. And you're not really dealing with the source of the problem. And if you continue to eat chocolate cake or shop or drink every time you feel whatever difficult emotion it is that you're trying to avoid, well, you're going to have a lot more problems on your hand in the future. Having a difficult conversation with a loved one is not pleasurable, right? In the moment. It actually requires a lot of discomfort and fear and uncertainty. But the relationship reaps tremendous benefits in the long run when we're willing to get uncomfortable and talk about hard things. Avoiding the hard conversations because we don't want to get uncomfortable only hurts the relationship in the long run. And we're doing this everywhere in our life. Again, like I said earlier, we're cherry picking our emotions. I will feel this, but I won't feel that. And just going all the way back to that passage that I read you from Eckhart Tolle earlier, we have to accept and then act. Whatever the present moment contains, accept it as if you had chosen it. So when we're talking about emotions, accept your emotions. Accept the difficult emotions. Feel them all the way through. And then you will be in a better position to act. Seeking feel-good emotions all the time does not promote growth. It stunts it. And think about it. How many problems in your life have been created simply because you were unwilling to feel difficult emotions? So how many missed opportunities have there been in your life because you were too scared, or you had too much self-doubt, or you weren't willing to feel uncertain? How many times have you eaten something because you feel a difficult emotion? I feel sad. I feel lonely. I feel bored. So eating is a very simple solution because it temporarily fills the void. And think about it, right? Emotion, all it is a vibration in the human body. And when we eat something, it changes the vibration in the human body. And that's why we get that relief. We get temporary relief from something that's just simply a vibration in the body. What if you were just willing to feel the vibration in the body that was a result of whatever difficult emotion you were rumbling with? So what is the actual solution here? Well, we have to be willing to feel difficult emotions on purpose. We have to accept them before we can act on them. And what do I mean by that? I don't want you to hear me saying you have to accept all difficult emotion and marinate in it for as long as humanly possible. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that a big part of life is going to be feeling difficult emotion, especially if you're living life with any level of boldness to it. And if life is 50-50, right? If half of life is feeling good stuff and half of life is feeling difficult stuff, if every time I feel a difficult emotion, I do something to avoid it, like eat or drink, it adds up to a lot of consequences over time. But if I learn how to accept the emotion in the moment and just sit with it and invite it to the table, ask it some questions, get to know it. Why is it even here? You can learn from it and choose your response consciously from there. That's how you accept and then act. So again, emotions are messengers. And it is our work, I believe it's our life's work to pay attention to the messengers and learn about what's underneath them. What is the message they contain? What information do they have for you? I will tell you this. I say your emotions are messengers because your emotions are messengers of really what you're thinking, right? And sort of your experiences from the past that are influencing your behavior today. I'll tell you an example from today. This is just like fresh in my mind. But I block my time every day in my business for how long projects are going to take me. And today I had like a 30-minute project that honestly ended up taking me about 3.5 hours because technology was not on my side and every single thing I did took me 4 times as long as I anticipated it would. And I started to feel very frustrated. And I accepted the frustration and I saw it, that it was in my arena. And I paused, I took a walk outside and I just asked myself like, okay, Courtney, what is the frustration about? And what was underneath the frustration for me was a very clear thought. This should not be so hard. I've wasted so much time. Right? And there were probably 10 other thoughts very similar to those. But either one of those thoughts, like this shouldn't be so hard, makes me feel frustrated because it makes me believe that it should be easier, right? But it's not easier. So I get super frustrated. And then guess what I do when I'm frustrated? I don't think as clearly. I make more mistakes. And the project takes me even longer, which just proves to me that this is really stinking hard and it shouldn't be this hard. So when I look at that messenger of frustration, and I look at what's underneath it, I'm then in choice because I can change the way I'm thinking about this. Because it's definitely not useful for me to think that way. If I want to keep feeling frustrated, sure, I could keep thinking that way. But if I actually want to get focused and get this project done, I need to change the way I'm thinking about it. Another passage that I pulled from Ryan Holiday's book is this, which I think is so applicable here. If an emotion can't change the condition or the situation you're dealing with, it's likely unhelpful. It's an unhelpful emotion, or quite possibly a destructive one. But it's what I feel, right, is what a lot of people say. And no one said anything about not feeling it. No one said you can't ever cry. If you need to take a moment, by all means, go ahead. Real strength lies in the control or in the domestication of one's emotions, not in pretending that they don't exist. And the way that I interpret the domestication of one's emotions is we have to take responsibility for managing our emotions. And in this case, frustration was in no way helping me today. It was very destructive. It was causing a lot of problems. And so I had to really take responsibility for causing that frustration. I was struggling unnecessarily because of the way I was thinking about what I was doing. Now, on the flip side, there is a lot of difficult emotion that you are going to feel in your lifetime that is going to be incredibly useful to you. I was having a conversation with a client earlier this week, and she was talking about really wanting to change the way that her family does dinner, because her family sits down in front of the TV every night, and she really wanted to change that. She wanted to have dinner at the table with no TV so they could all connect as a family. And when I talked to her about why she had not yet had that conversation with her family, she talked about just all this discomfort. You know, she had a lot of fear about how they were going to react. And when I asked her, is it worth it for you to feel discomfort, to have this difficult conversation in order to get your family to connect better at dinner time? Which of course was an absolute yes. And with your growth process, with the change process on your journey to better health, you're going to have to do a lot of things that are not comfortable for you to do. And yet, feeling difficult emotion in those moments, walking into a gym when you haven't been there in 10 years, going to be uncomfortable, might even be scary. But is it worth it to you to feel those emotions, accept them, and act anyway? And how much of your thinking is actually causing you to feel more uncomfortable or nervous than necessary? That's another way that we take responsibility for our emotions. So here's a few takeaways from today. First of all, awareness of how you truly feel is often uncomfortable. Awareness itself is often uncomfortable of anything, and that is totally okay. But if you rush to change it without first accepting it, you're going to cause a lot of long-term consequences because you're going to buffer. You're going to reach for false pleasures to temporarily make yourself feel better, and you're not really getting to the root of the problem. You also can't change what you feel in a healthy way if you don't first acknowledge what you feel. And this is why learning to feel emotion is so important to our health, right? If I cannot acknowledge what I feel if I'm not aware of it. So awareness is key. And then accepting the emotion, whatever it is, sitting with it, and then asking yourself, is this useful to me? Am I contributing to this emotion because of the way I'm thinking? And most likely the answer is a definite yes. The other thing I want to remind you of is emotion is not good or bad. Emotion is just like the human body. It just is a part of the human experience. And the more you practice learning to feel all emotion, the quicker you will be able to expand your life. Because think about it. If you weren't afraid to feel any emotion, what would you do differently in your life? I bet a lot. So then it always comes up, clients always ask, well, Courtney, I don't even know how to feel certain emotions because I have been running from them for so long. I don't even know how to label an emotion. And of course, this is largely the work that I do inside my membership site, Rumble and Rise. But I will tell you this, just describing the emotion to yourself, like physically describing where you feel it in your body, explaining it to somebody as if they had never felt an emotion. And there doesn't even have to be a somebody in the room, right? You could just imagine that there was somebody sitting across from you who was incapable of feeling, and you were trying to get them to understand what you were feeling. How would you describe what you're feeling in your body to that person? And as you describe it, you might be pleasantly surprised that you are actually able to name it. But even if you can't name it, just starting with describing emotion is so powerful. And also, describing emotion allows you to stay with it, right? It allows you to be in the experience of it without retreating from it. I also want to say, be willing to explore the message behind the emotion. What are the thoughts? What is the perception of what's happening that is driving you to feel this way? Because then and only then can you take responsibility for how you move forward. You can definitely marinate in the difficult emotion for as long as you want, but you can also take responsibility for feeling that emotion and then changing the intensity of the emotion by changing your perception of what's happening. And that is all a practice, right? This is, again, all largely the work that I do with my clients. So, I'm just giving you a taste of it here, but I hope that there was something in this episode that will help you to start maybe letting your guard down a little bit in terms of allowing yourself to feel emotion. Because you can't heal if you don't feel. And health is absolutely a process of healing. So you must learn to feel all of your emotion. So hopefully this was a little bit of a gateway for you. So in the next month of the podcast, I just want to tell you that we are going to move into a new theme, which is going to be the pursuit of healthy pleasure. And this is going to be fun because I'm going to talk about all the ways in which I see women restricting joy and pleasure from their life and how we actually go about it in kind of a false way and how damaging that is to our health. But I also have an amazing relationship and sex expert coming in to talk to us about those things, which I think is just going to be awesome. So I hope you'll join me for those conversations. And if this was the first time you ever listened to this podcast, I hope you loved it. And if you have been a frequent listener of the show and have yet to leave a review, ladies, I need reviews. It helps so much to get this podcast in more ears. So if you can head on over to iTunes and just rate and review the podcast, it is a incredible thing for me and my team, and it does not go unnoticed, and I am so grateful in advance. So food for thought there. And that's it. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you again very soon. Take care. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story, and it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort, and with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.